Hello everyone. This video 2, is dedicated to covering chapter 12 again from pages 158 up to the end of page 161. So it actually talks about the tongue tips and slips. We come to know more about the phenomena of the tip of the tongue, and then we come across again slips of the tongue, slips of the brain, as well as the slips of the ear. So now let me start introducing this class my way. Aside from the book, it should first be noted that the words we produce when we speak and those we hear when we understand speech are continuous. Which means that when we say the word, for example, dog, we do not say D and then we stop to say O and then we again stop to say G. On the contrary, actually, we produce one continuous sound like dog. This is also true of saying or reading a written sentence, an entire sentence, of course. Now, when we say, for example, normally the study of language, we do not say the, then we stop to say study, then we have another pause to say of, and then language. Of course, we use one continuous form to say the study of language, unless the speaker is suffering from a damage in one of the hemispheres that we referred to earlier. For thousands of years, scholars and philosophers interested in the nature of language have believed that language and speech are composed of discrete units of sound and meaning. Although the sound represented by the letter or the letters D, O, and G may be continuous on the physical level, still the word can be considered to be composed of separate sounds. This is as true of language without a written alphabet, but for English it is with a written form. While these units are not normally observed in errors-free speech errors which move or substitute. Sometimes when we say a word or we say or utter a sentence, we delete. Sometimes we add sounds or words or phrases. These words, phrases might be substituted or they are not existing at all in the target word or target sentence. As you all know, that in our daily dialogues and conversations, when we take part in a speech act or we converse or talk to each other, of course we make mistakes, and these mistakes normally happen to every even normal human being. So we see here minor production difficulties of this sort may provide possible clues to how our linguistic knowledge is organized within the brain. This is very close to the tip of the tongue phenomenon. So as you see here, the highlighted words here, tip of the tongue, it is a phenomenon in which we feel that some word or a word is just eluding us, closing the way. So we feel that we have the word here on the tip of the tongue, but it doesn't come at once, so that we know the word, but it just won't come to the surface. Studies of this phenomenon have shown that speakers generally have an accurate phonological outline of the word, can get the initial sound correct, and mostly know the number of syllables in the word. This experience also mainly occurs with uncommon words and names. It suggests that word storage system may be particularly organized on the basis of some phonological information, and that up to the end. This means what? It means that the storage of the words that we have in our brains, this is for normal human being again, organized in a way similar to the words organized in a dictionary. So when you want to find a word, for example, brain in a dictionary, you do not go to start checking the word or the position of the word right from the letter A. So no, on the contrary, actually you start with the letter B. Then you try to find BA, BB, BC, and so on until you arrive at the word BR. I mean the consonant clusters B and R. Then you go to A, then you go to A, I, and N until you find the word if it is available in your dictionary. So the brain actually stores the words or the amount of words that we have in a way similar to a physical dictionary. So the the case here is what? When we want to say any word, for example, dog that I used earlier, we try to retrieve the word from the brain. Of course, we have the word, it is found in the brain, in one of the hemispheres, or in any other area of the brain. It's not fixed actually. But what we try to do is what? We mentally try to organize the word, how we, or the way we retrieve the word from the storage that we have in our brain. Similar again to the organization of words found in the physical. These errors, or let's say slips of the tongue, can occur on different levels. Let's take, for example, on word level. So we may try to say the word slip, S-L-I-P. Instead, we may use strip. Instead of S, we may replace the S with T. Cry and dry. So again, it is possible for a speaker to replace the letter C with the D to produce dry instead of cry. On the semantic level, again, which is also not only on the phonological level, now on the semantic level, instead of saying pull, we may use or replace the word to be push. So you mean to pull a door or to pull something, instead you may replace it with a push. But you actually do not intend to use push instead of pull, but this is why we say it is a slip of the tongue. Now, maybe on the phrase level, we may say stick in the mud. This is the normal sense of the phrase. Instead, the speaker may say smoke in the tid. Now, what happens here is that the consonant segments exchange. Instead of saying the ST, actually it is replaced by the SM, and then it is produced in the way that I read. Maybe another example, ad hoc. Instead, the speaker may say odd hack. Here, what happens is that the vowel segments exchange. Another example, we may say easily enough. This is the correct usage of the phrase easily enough. The speaker may say ease enoughly. So here what happens is that we see the movement of the suffix. So of course, to limit the number of the slips that people or speakers make, this is dramatic. There is no possible way actually to have a limited number of the slips that speakers produce every day. The book refers, interestingly, to some of the examples that are close to the ones that I used. Now, before, as you can see here, when we make mistakes in this retrieval process, there are often strong phonological similarities between the target word we are trying to say and the mistake we actually produce. Before I start reading you the examples that you can find here in front of you, maybe this is seen in the examples like character. So character, here we have a word which consists of 3 syllables. And compare the word character with the word pen. So we will see here we don't have that similarities in the number of syllables between these two words, neither from the phonological level, nor is it from the let's say semantic level. So the meaning of character and pen are not close. This is semantic. These are the semantic characterizations or characteristics of the two words, character and pen. And from the phonological level, you see here the number of syllables are different. Here we have character of 3 syllables, and we have pen, which consists of just 1 syllable. Another example, as you can, speakers produce. Let's see this example. It's very nice actually to see. So you see here the one that I'm highlighting, fire distinguisher, fire distinguisher. Of course, there is no consistency in the meaning of these two words. They have no any collocation in the meaning of. We don't have fire distinguisher, but instead we have fire extinguisher. So here, if you compare the number of syllables and phonological level between these two words, distinguisher and extinguisher, we find these are similar in a way or another. So mistakes of this type are sometimes referred to as malapropisms. So you can find also the definition of this highlighted word, which is also written in bold type in the end of, or at the end of your book, under the chapter or the section of the glossary. The book also, as you can see here, under the subsection of slips of the tongue, slips of the tongue. So here we have some supportive examples of what I have been trying to say. As you see here, we have some highlighted examples and description to the slips, or to the phenomenon of slips of the tongue. You see here we have another type of speech error is commonly described as slip of the tongue. For further reading, you can go to the dictionary that I referred to in the previous video, to go to Dictionary of Linguistics and Phonetics by David Croston. This produces expressions such as a large, showy stort. You see here a large, showy stort. Instead, the speaker was trying to say make a long story short. You see here we have what? A collapse in the way that the speaker, when replacing some of the consonants from the initial letters of the first word with the initial letters of the second word. Another example here we have what? Use the door to open the key. You see here we have replacement, whole replacement of the words, not on the phonological level, but on the positions and the semantic level of the words. So of course there is no door to open the key, but we use the key to open the door, so we don't use the door to open the key. You see here, sometimes this seems very ridiculous and people may laugh on these mistakes, and we truly use, or we make these errors every day, and sometimes we find people laugh at us, and then momently we try to retrieve the correct word and put it in the correct position. So here again we have what? Another phenomena, or something we call spoonerism. Spoonerism, this is after William Spooner, and yeah, then you can also go to the glossary section to find the meaning of spoonerism. It is what about what? A slip of the tongue. It's okay, it's a slip of the tongue in which two parts of words or two words are switched. As you see here, the door to open the key. So the speaker was trying to say the key to open the door. So here we have what? We have a replacement or a switching of two words and two parts of words as well. You see here? Another example of slips, we have slips of the brain. Slips of the brain, which is simply where substitution as a similar but inappropriate word is used instead of the target. Most everyday slips, however, are not as entertaining as these examples, the examples that you can see here. They are often simply the result of a sound being carried over from one word to the next, As in, we have what very nice example here. We have black boxes, black boxes. For what? These two words stand for what? For black boxes. You see here, black with black is okay, but there is what? Another shift from the L here, which is planted and it has got no position in box, you see? So box is okay, B-O-X-E-X, O-O-E-S, sorry. So there is what? The influence of this L, which occurs again here between the sound B and O, B and O, to produce what? Black blocks. Now, O sound used in one word in anticipation of its occurrence in the next word, as in what? Roman numeral. You see here, these two words stand for Roman numeral, sorry. Again, this is my slip of the tongue as an example. So here we have what? No man. Instead, it should be what? Roman. So what happens here is the influence of the initial letter N, which occurs and replaces what? The letter N here, the letter to be what? Sorry, the letter R replaces the N to produce what? Roman numeral. Instead, the person or the speaker was trying to say Roman numeral. So you see here, again, we have another type of substitution. Maybe we plant or we put a letter or sound, sorry, which is not existing in the actual word or in the real word. So you see here, the influence of B occurs right here, while the influence here, so we have what? This is called the progressive influence. Progressive influence. But here we have what? Regressive influence. Regressive influence. The examples, these two examples, illustrate what is meant by the progressive and the regressive. It is not found in the book, but I'm trying to describe and to give some further explanation to what is meant here by these two examples given in the book. So here we have the progressive, while here we have the regressive. It is not a kind of assimilation, however, it is a kind of letter or sound substitution. Another example of slips, we have slips of the ear. Slips of the ear. You can see here, I may highlight some parts in this paragraph here. We have what? We have one other type of slips may provide some clues to how the brain tries to make sense of the auditory signal it receives. Now, this type of slip or slips is neither related to the tongue nor is it related to the brain. It is with the auditory signal. So we, as receiver of a word or yes or a sentence, we make mistakes in the hearing of the word. So we mishear the word. So for example, these before that, we have what? Slips of the ear. Again, the dictionary, you know where to find it, can result, for example, in hearing like great ape. Great ape. So actually, we don't have any collocation in these two words to produce a meaningful phrase. So great ape, unless the context doomed to be interpreted or seen in that way. But actually here, the speaker is trying to talk about type of tapes and giving the letter, the color of the tape. So you see, letter and color, they are what? They are similar in their own phonological level. That's why I made my own mistake here. Okay, so a great ape and great tape. You see here, what we have, the speaker said or says gray ape, while we mishear the word to be great ape. You may wonder, what do you mean by the great ape? While you are talking about things that are related to glues or tapes or whatever. Okay, so this is again what? Related not to the producer, not to the speaker, but to the receiver of the word or of the speech in total. You see here we have now what? Generally, if you are asked, account for the types of slips that normal human being may make. So you do what? You try to account for these three types of slips, starting with the phenomena of the slip of the tongue. This is as a phenomenon. Then you try to describe what is meant by the slips of the tongue. You come across slips of the brain, and you add your narration or your essay with the slips of the ear, giving or supporting your answer with examples. Again, this is question maybe number 3 or number 4. Account for the types of the slips. So here you start with, we will answer with what? With exploring the phenomena of the tongue tip phenomenon. Then you come across the description of the 3 types of slips. Slips of the tongue, slips of the brain, slips of the ear, and this is the answer of the question that you might be asked later. Let's move to page 160, and we start with aphasia. So in the beginning, I may raise to ask 2 questions, and these 2 questions are interrelated actually. Page 160 starts with aphasia. And in the beginning, we have 2 questions to raise. What is meant by aphasia? So if you are asked such a question, the answer to this definition is found like this. Aphasia is defined as an impairment. It means inability of language function due to localized brain damage. Of course, there is a brain damage in one of the areas that leads to difficulty in what? In either understanding or in producing linguistic forms. When we say linguistic forms, it means sentences that are interpretable and comprehensible to the listener. So this is exactly the definition if you ask what is meant by aphasia. But if you ask another question like account for the types of aphasia, here you need to go to what? To tell more about Broca's aphasia, Wernicke's aphasia, and conduction aphasia, which I'm going to explain in the coming minutes. So now let's know the cause of aphasia. It is caused by a stroke. So traumatic head injuries from violence or accident may have similar effects. Those effects can range from mild to severe, from simple to hard. Reduction in the ability to use language. When we say the ability to use language, it means the ability to produce or understand the very language. Someone who is aphasic often has interrelated language disorders. So again, here we have what, as we said, due to the damage in one of the areas or the hemispheres, and that difficulty in understanding can lead to difficulty in production. Of course, if a person is not able to understand correctly, the production of his or her speech will be, of course, not that enough to be understood when that person tries to produce a particular utterance. The first type of aphasia is Broca's aphasia. So if you are asked again, account for the types of aphasia, you start defining what is meant by aphasia. Then you come across knowing or telling more about the 3 types of aphasia. So you start with Broca's aphasia. It is actually the serious language disorder known as Broca's aphasia, and characterized by what? By a substantially reduced amount of speech, distorted articulation, and slow, often effortful speech. So that person who suffers from Broca's aphasia finds it very difficult to produce a speech. Why? Because as you remember, we earlier studied the Broca's area, which is responsible for what? Responsible for the speech production. And here what is said often consists almost entirely of lexical morphemes. So we have what? 2 important things to start with. We have the lexical morphemes, mostly, so we don't have if a person find it very thoughtful, very difficult to use the nouns, the verbs, the adjectives easily, and as described in chapter 6, this is related to the last year, the frequent omission of the functional morphemes, like articles, prepositions, and the inflectional morphemes like plural s, past tense. So this person, as we said, is not able to produce a language which is actually described full in terms of the use of morphemes like the functional morphemes or inflectional morphemes And the book gives us very nice examples to what is meant by the functional, and this is studied last year also in the grammar. Functional morphemes like the articles and so on, while the inflectional morphemes that are added to maybe to the end of the words with the plural, the past tense. So there is no ability for that person to what to to use the correct tense. For example, maybe I played tennis last night, and instead of I played tennis last night, so he or she cannot produce the correct tense form to say I played and tennis, for example, last night, to combine between the ed morpheme, inflectional morpheme, with the adverb of past, which is yesterday. This led to the characterization of this type as aphasic speech as lacking grammatical form or agrammatic. So if you are asked again what is agrammatic speech, it is the disability of using the grammar which is related to the morphemes correctly, to use the grammar or the grammatical markers correctly. So almost they are omitted or missed in this speech. The book also supports us with some examples that are related to the omission of the morphemes. As you see here in the first example, I eggs and eat and drink coffee breakfast. So you see here, this is seen as to be a sentence, but actually it is null of grammar. So we don't have I eggs. So the speaker may maybe trying to say I eat eggs and drink coffee for breakfast. This is the correct form of the sentence that I have just highlighted. Another example here, we have another example to support the disability or disorder, which might be sometimes severe. So you see this example, my cheek, my cheek, very annoyance, main is my shoulder. So you see here we don't have actually connected or connection between the ideas of what the speaker is trying to say. So sometimes we feel that it is not understandable, not interpretable, and this is one of the considerations that, if you remember, chapter 11 focuses on the discourse, and this discourse should be interpretable to be understood. The second type of aphasia is that type of language disorder. It is the Wernicke's aphasia. Wernicke's aphasia is the result or results in difficulties in the auditory comprehension, sometimes called the sensory aphasia, and mainly known as what broke a Wernicke's aphasia. You know, and I hope you remember from the previous class or from the previous video, we talked about what is meant by the Wernicke's area, which is responsible for speech comprehension now this time. So the result here for that person who is aphasic in the Wernicke's area, which is between two brackets, Wernicke's aphasia, it is about the difficulty in finding the correct word, sometimes referred to as anomia. So again, here you have another definition to be considered. Also happens in Wernicke's aphasia. To overcome the word finding difficulties, speakers use different strategies, such as trying to describe objects or talking about the purpose as, for example, that person is not able at that moment to use the word or to find the word ashtray. So ashtray is replaced by what? The thing to put cigarettes in. To ask about the meaning, to ask that person about the meaning of ashtray, of course, that person can understand what is meant by to, but the trouble is with retrieving the word from the savory in the brain to say ashtray. Instead, that person tries to use strategy like describing the function or the use of that word. For example, marker, I think I use this example very frequently. Marker, or the marker that we use to write on the board. So maybe at that moment I can't remember or I can't, for non-normal human being, for those people who are Wernicke aphasic, that person might not be able to bring or retrieve the word marker. Instead, he or she may use another strategy, which is the description of the use or function of that thing. So a thing which is used to write or for writing on the board, and the writing can be erased very easily by an eraser, but I can't actually remember what is the exact meaning or the exact word. So here the trouble is with finding the exact word, But this is not for the one that we talked about in the beginning of the class. It is not related to the phenomenon of the tip of the tongue phenomenon, that you know the word but you cannot bring it at once. No, this is for normal human being. That phenomenon is about normal human being. But here, when we find a person who isn't able to bring about the exact word to be used at once when speaking, and this happens very frequently, it is about Wernicke's aphasia, as I referred in the beginning. The third and last type of aphasia is the conduction aphasia. Conduction aphasia, as you can see here. Actually, this type of aphasia is not that common among people, but it has been associated with the damage to the arcuate fasciculus. You remember arcuate fasciculus, which is one of Wernicke's discoveries, is responsible for what? For connecting the two hemispheres, the Broca's and Wernicke's hemispheres. So now any damage, or those people, any damage between these strips that connect, let's say the wires that connect, it's not wires, of course, the strips, the fiber optics, the fibers that connect these two hemispheres, produce a very serious damage in both the comprehension and the production of speech. So, but we have different symptoms, different types of those people who are aphasic with the conduction aphasia. So now what we have here is this disorder sometimes in mispronouncing the words, but typically do not have articulation problem. So if you want to check or examine the articulation organism which are responsible for speech production, they are okay and they have no trouble at all. But still, because the connection between the two hemispheres is obvious, so the person is having a pronunciation problem. Again, they are fluent but may have disrupted rhyme because of pauses and hesitations. So they are hesitant when they try to retrieve a word. They do not find the chance actually to retrieve the word at the moment. That's why they hesitate, they pause, they try to move around the word, describe the word, as we stated earlier. So comprehension of speech, of spoken words, is normally good. This is about the comprehension now. However, the task of repeating the very word is not that easy, which creates major difficulty with forms, such as you see here, the example given in the book, we have the vase to say vosh being reported as attempt or an attempt or attempted repetition of the words base and wash. What a speaker hears and understands can't be transferred very successfully. This is very important, which actually summarizes the whole story that I have been talking about. Now, the speaker hears and understands. Actually, what that person hears or understands after hearing cannot be transferred. So there is the capability and the ability to hear, the capability to understand what he or she hears, but to reproduce or to transfer the very word that he or she hears is not always very easy. That's why it is not the person is not successful in that type of production. Now, it should be also emphasized that many of these symptoms, like the word finding difficulty, for example, can occur in all types of aphasia. So all these types that we have actually been describing can be symptomized with what? With the word finding difficulty. So it might happen with those aphasic with the Broca's, with Wernicke's, and to the conduction aphasia as well. Okay. Now they can also occur in more general disorder resulting from brain disease. It is again a result of a brain disease as in dementia and Alzheimer's diseases. So difficulties again in speaking can also be accompanied by difficulties or difficulty in writing. So the disability of speaking, of course, in this type of aphasia may result in difficulty in writing. So it is about what? An impairment of the auditory comprehension which tends to be accompanied by reading difficulty. So the four skills, comprehension, the hearing, auditory, sensory, here we have a problem with. And we have a problem with the comprehension, a problem with the production, a problem with writing, or a problem with speaking. So all these skills can be found in this type of aphasia. Actually, that's why it is right from the beginning stated that it has not been very much common among people. So now we have what language disorder of this type we have described are almost always the result of injury to the left hemisphere. Why left hemisphere? Because it is close. The fasciculus, the acute fasciculus that we talked about earlier, is which is given number four, sorry, is very close to Wernicke's area. So we need what to go back to maybe to the figure found on page 165. Number one resembles or illustrates Broca's aphasia. Number two, Broca's aphasia, yes. Number two is about Wernicke's aphasia. Number three, it is about the motor cortex. Number four, which is our own concern here, it is about the articulate fasciculus. You remember? So the articulate fasciculus, which is given number four, is close to number two, and generally these two components are related to speech comprehension. But also we have a combination of all these types of aphasia. So the person with a conduction aphasia might not be, we have different types of those people, might not be able to speak properly, might not be able to produce speech properly. So these two, why? Because of an injury or because a disease in the brain resulted from, maybe from an accident or other different reasons. And with this area, actually I end this video. I hope it is of benefit, and if you have any questions in your mind, things that you feel still not clear, you can raise questions, and I will send also the link of this video as I did with the first one. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate. Thanks for watching and listening. Bye bye.